Hey everybody, this is Tea Time with Sandra, and I'm Sandra Kim. It is Wednesday, October 3rd, 2018, and today we're going to be talking about how to talk to yourself, particularly inner critic, in ways that you actually deserve, which may be different from ways that we actually normally talk to ourselves. So I wanted to bring this up because this is something I think pretty much everybody deals with, which is the toxic chatter in our head. So let's just pause for a second and just kind of hear what the running dialogue in the back of your head is like. So if you want to, please share in the chat box what you heard. Was it pleasant words? Was it affirming words? Was it kind of negative words? Was it harsh words about yourself, or maybe about other people, maybe about me? Right. So we all have this constant dialogue happening in the back of our head. Sometimes we're aware of it, sometimes we're not. But unfortunately, oftentimes it's a pretty negative uh, commentary that's going on. So it's like, oh, don't do that. Oh, are you doing that right? Ooh, what's going on? I don't know about that. And it could be really difficult to be moving, to feel like things are going well, or things are, or like feeling like you can hear what you're actually saying, what you're actually feeling, when you're driven by a lot of kind of this toxicity and this fear that's in the back of our heads. And so I just want to, for folks who don't know that much about this, I want to go kind of step back a bit and talk a little bit about where those toxic voices come from. Because I think most people hear those toxic voices in the forms of, you should do this, you can't do that, you must do this, you have to do that. Kind of those words that are used to be really coercive to us. Those words, I believe, come from systemic oppression. Where do we hear the messages that we're not enough, that we're not competent, we're not lovable, we're not important, that we don't really matter? I would say that comes from different forms of systemic oppression. And that includes not just for folks who have marginalized identities, but for people who have privileged identities as well. And so knowing that actually everybody gets put up into this like Ken or Barbie model, for example. You either have to be Ken or Barbie in order to be acceptable. And that's not possible, definitely for people who don't look like them, but then who actually does look like them, right? Even if you have all those identities, that's still a pretty impossible standard to live up to. And so in our society, we get taught that whether that's due to our gender, our race, our class, our ability, our size, our age, that that we need to actually not be ourselves. We actually need to be somebody else in order to be acceptable. We need to have that job. We need to have that weight. We need to have that husband or partner, right? We need to look a certain way, live a certain way in order to be acceptable in our society. And so for me, it's really important to start separating out those voices, those toxic voices, from our inner voice. Because as long as those two are still fused together, it feels like that we are the toxicity, actually. And there's no actual space for anything other than our toxicity. And so this practice I'm going to be guiding you through is a writing practice where you'll be able to start distinguishing between the toxic voices and yourself. So to give you an example of how this operates, one of my main toxic voices is the need to go, to do. And that comes from a place of never knowing like when the shit's gonna hit the fans, like when things are gonna go bad. And it's a trauma reaction, right? From things going badly and not wanting that to happen again. And so what happens is that for me, when things are just kind of fine, I start creating the need, I feel the need to like do something, do more, move faster, go as fast as I can, because who knows how long it's going to take, and what's going to happen along the way, right? So basically trying to front load as much as possible, because it might explode at any moment. And obviously that can happen at times, but because it's a constant toxic voice of mine, it's not something that obviously is healthy for me. It's not something that is actually appropriate to all moments of my life. And it's something that I feel urgency and anxiety come up in my body quite often when I'm doing absolutely nothing intentionally, when I'm resting, for example. And that was something that I really needed to work with, particularly when I was on sabbatical, because because before, when I was still running Everyday Feminism, it made sense that there was a lot of urgency and anxiety because we were in kind of a difficult financial situation that was my responsibility to take care of. But I noticed that even when I left that financial responsibility behind and was responsible for just myself, which was a huge relief after so long of being financially responsible for other people. When I actually just took time for myself and I gave myself permission to not have any responsibilities at all, and did nothing, and I'm single, I live by myself, and so I had so much more space and freedom than is available for most other people in the world. And it was fascinating to see how I spent the first few weeks just like having a lot of urgency, anxiety come at my body. Like I had to do something, even though I literally intentionally didn't have anything to do other than feed myself, really. And so I was able to just let those feelings arise and notice that desire to go and do, and let them go, actually. Just let it go. Because I could see that they weren't me. They were just these deeply ingrained habits, survival strategies that I had had. And like I said, these survival strategies come from somewhere. It comes from a time when, and this is something I learned from my family as well. So I'm not sure there's a specific incident that led me to have this survival strategy, but this has always kind of been a part of my environment from my family. And it really reflects what I call a hurt one, some kind of trauma that I've had that could have been passed down from my ancestors, or something that also happened to me in this lifetime, but where like I didn't move fast enough and I wasn't ready for the thing that happened. And so there's this fear that I won't be actually able to handle whatever comes, right? I have to prepare a whole lot to make sure something bad doesn't happen, versus like kind of anything could happen, good or bad, right? And feeling like, okay, like as long as I'm present to what's going on around me and to myself, then like I can roll with it and I can ask for help around what's happening. So instead of having that type of approach, I have the whole like fear-based, must prepare, must move, must do fast, or else approach. And so starting to distinguish, and this is something I've been working on, for years now, for several years now, and it shows up in more and more subtle ways, but I'm also more equipped, more skillful at releasing them, at noticing when they come up and releasing them. But I wasn't in the beginning. In the beginning, they were so fused together. So I wanted to show you a writing practice that can help you start to distinguish between the two. And I also, so if anybody is resonating with the story that I'm sharing, or has like a toxic voice that they've heard themselves have, I'd love to hear it through the chat box, what's coming up for you. Because like I said, while our particular narratives are unique and specific to us, there's a common dynamic in many of them of not feeling like we're safe enough, where we're safe, that we matter, that we're important, that we're lovable, that we are capable. And so we develop these survival strategies that I call misguided helpers, actually, who try to protect us, to make sure like that nobody finds out that we are this inadequate, that there's something wrong about us, that we don't want anyone to ever find that out. So we have all these coping strategies that tell us that we have to do this, or we should do that, or we must be like this, or we can't do that, and so to try to keep us safe, actually. But the problem with that is that they're not actually appropriate for everything, obviously. If you have one hammer and you just throw it at everything, not going to work out for you, right? So some things that folks are sharing in the chat box around toxic messages they have is like, I don't deserve rest, or my worth is tied to my work. That's a really common one in the type of exploitative capitalist society that we live in, where our productivity determines how valuable we are in our society. I had somebody once ask me, like, why do we take care of elderly? They don't even work. And I was just like, because they're human. And they're human, they're people. And I had to remind him of that fact. And like, as human beings, we deserve care. We don't need to work to deserve to be supported as human beings, but that's what our society says. Other folks are saying that they said, I worry about abandonment, and so I want to be the peacemaker and solve everyone's problems when they're fighting, so no one leaves, but then I don't focus on myself. That's a really, really common issue for folks, particularly amongst activists, I believe, just because we are so other people oriented and trying to help things get resolved and help things get better, that we often actually don't notice what do we need, right? We scan the group versus scanning ourselves. Another person shared, I have a voice that blames me, my actions for my chronic pain. Yeah, that's a lot of the victim blaming that we get taught in our society, that if we are hurt, then it's our fault, versus the fact that like something hurtful has happened to us, and what was that hurtful thing, right? And how do we take care of that pain, and what can we do to make sure that action, that hurtful action, doesn't happen again, right? So another person shared that I'm the adult child of alcoholic dad and codependent mom. There was a lot of fear in my house about how my dad would behave. I grew up to be afraid of everything and very critical of myself around the right and wrong of how I respond to pretty much any situation. Yeah, that's so real. I feel like that what we learned in our childhood to survive as children is often what we carry into our adult life, unless we've done the proactive healing around it. So it is possible to free ourselves of those habits, but it requires us to get in touch actually with that pain and where it comes from. So even the ability to name that this is actually what's coming up for you and this is where it comes from is actually a huge, huge, huge step that I want to acknowledge that people are doing right now. The fact that you're even on this call as a healing space is actually a really big deal. Somebody has shared before that one of the best things that this Tea Time with Sandra does for them is that it gives them a way to every week show up for themselves, every week invest in their own healing, invest in their own liberation. So I just want to acknowledge that, because sometimes it feels like when you are starting to when you're starting to go from disassociation and being numbed out to the pain to getting in touch with it and starting to name it, it can feel really overwhelming, because you're going from numbness to feeling it actually. And I just want to name that that's actually part of the process. And that part of the process is that feeling it again and it may, because it's new, it could be overwhelming, but if you have practices like the ones that I've been sharing, it can be a safe container for you to start to release it. And part of that conversation is also knowing when to pull back from going deeper into things that are painful, that you don't have to dive all the way in and go to the deep, dark recesses of your soul the first few times you do this. Specifically, I'm going to have you start working on a situation, a toxic voice of yourself that you have. And I want it to be something that is not deeply embedded, something that's not like really overwhelming. I would prefer if you chose a toxic message that is frustrating for you, as well as not emotionally charged for you. Not so deeply emotionally charged for you. We're not trying to go for raw things. We're trying to go for something that is difficult, but not like hugely difficult for you, and whatever way that means for you. So I'll take just a minute here for folks who haven't shared yet, to actually think about what toxic voice, what situation you want to be thinking about, writing about. And if you want, you can share it in the chat box. So once again, we're just choosing a situation of a toxic voice that often comes up around telling you should or shouldn't do something, or you have to, you must, you can't, something that's trying to keep you safe, but not in actual useful, skillful ways. Okay. So if you have a situation or a toxic voice that you want to share in the chat box, that'd be great. Oh yeah, see, somebody else shared. Someone shared that I'm 6'1", and so part of what shows up for me is constantly worrying about taking up too much space, and in conversations. Yes, there are ways that there are ways we're not sure about how we show up and impact people, actually, because other people actually need to reflect that to us. And so whether that's taking up, quote unquote, too much space, or whether that's making ourselves so invisible, that those are things that happen as a way of trying to navigate how we can be safe in this world. All right. So I would like, got another one. Somebody else wrote that their toxic voice is around being professional, be appropriate, don't complain about injustice. This workplace does not take a political stance. But we're a county setting that does see and welcomes undocumented immigrants. So kind of, what does it mean? Sounds like what to me is like managing the tension between the ways that we're taught to show up, particularly at work, which is where our money comes from, which is what we need to survive. And so that could be difficult to manage both our values and how we want to show up in this work and what we want to say, as compared to like what is acceptable at the workplace and what is, quote unquote, seen as professional, which for many of us can be very marginalizing if we don't fit into that kind of white collar, middle class, white male persona culture, which I would even argue that a lot of middle class white men actually also don't particularly enjoy, from what I've seen and heard. So understanding that these are really these rules, these rigid rules that have been imposed upon us, and And until we become conscious of them and start talking about them with other people, they often will just go unchecked. But our ability to talk about them with other people and the hopes of trying to get a conversation around changing them really needs to start with us being grounded in what's coming up for ourselves. So I would like for you to create this little document for yourself. So there are 2 columns. On one side, you have you. This is your voice. The other side, you have the misguided helper, which is the coping strategy that you have to survive, which could be like, be careful, or it could be don't take up too much space, or it could be professional, right? Or be the peacemaker. It could be the voice behind those comments. And so I want you to, we're going to take some time, and you're going to be writing, first, what does the misguided helper say? Then you're going to respond to them. Then you're going to respond to their response and go back and forth, basically. And the way that you're going to respond to them is with 3 things. You can respond to them with only acknowledgments. So this can be, if I see that you're scared, or I see that you're concerned about this, it seems like you feel this way. So it's just a straight acknowledgement of what is being said. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to think it's acceptable. You don't have to like it, but you're just acknowledging like that you're worried, that like you're worried about losing your job, for example, or you're worried of how other people might react. And you're just like, I see that. Like, I see that you're worried about that. So affirmations it could be something more positive. It could be like, I see that you're actually just trying to keep me safe, or I feel like this is happening and that's hard. So, and with the compassionate tone, right? So this is just taking the acknowledgments and being a little bit more positive, being a little more caring, and being a little more compassionate. But it's still just more in the like, I see this, I hear that. It feels like this to me. So it's really reflecting what you're hearing, but in your own voice, right? And really trying to get to the heart of the matter. So if somebody's like, don't do that, if you talk to voices like, don't do that, and you're like, oh, I see that you're concerned. I see that you're worried, right? And then questions. So these are things that you can respond with, like, oh, I see that you're worried. Is there something else that we could do? Is there something I can do? It could be questions like, what is that more? Can you tell me more about where that's coming from? Right? So you can dig deeper, or you could offer options, right? So being curious, offering options, these are useful. And really, it's going to be, it might feel a little funny because you're kind of bouncing between voices, the toxic voice of the misguided helper and your own inner voice. But we're going to take some time to do this. So hopefully it may be awkward at first, but hopefully you'll be able to go back and forth with more practice. It'll become a little bit easier. So folks, have any questions before we get started? All right, seems I've got no questions. So I want folks to start writing. I'm going to give you probably about 10 minutes. If you have any questions, to type in the chat box and I will answer them. But the idea is, and I guess I could facilitate this. So actually, I'll actually facilitate a bit more than just having silence for 10 minutes. So in your on your sheet of paper, I'd like for you to write down, number one, what your toxic voice of the misguided helper is saying to you. And you can write I statements, be like, I feel da 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 da, like you shouldn't do blah blah blah. You just write until I say, and stop for a second. Okay. So now we're going to write down what you are feeling, how you would like to respond. And so I want us to take actually a couple deep breaths, or normal breaths if you can't do a deep breath, and just kind of reground in our body. So following along with me, breathing in, notice the breath coming in, breathing out, notice the breath going out, breathing in, notice the breath coming in, breathing out, notice the breath going out. Breathing in, notice the breath coming in. Breathing out, notice the breath going out. Just taking breaths, normal breaths or deep breaths, whichever you prefer. And so looking back at your sheet, I want you to respond with acknowledgement for now. Just reflect, what are you hearing in that comment? And going a little deeper, I'm hearing fear, I'm hearing concern, I'm hearing whatever it may be. And then I want you to add a question that you like to ask it. And that could be, where's that feeling coming from? It could be, what is that like for you? Are you feeling this way? Right? How are you feeling about this? So just ask a kind of a question to help dig deeper a bit. Okay. So hopefully you're done. If not, you can continue writing. But now that you are done with your voice, I want you to write a response from the toxic voice perspective. And that toxic voice could be saying anything. Whatever is arising for you, there's no right or wrong. It's just like whatever is coming up. Okay. So now we're going to have you respond to what they said. And this time, still using starting off acknowledgements. So just reflecting back, what is it that you heard? It sounds like blank. I'm hearing blank. It feels like you're feeling blank. Okay, so now you've written the acknowledgements. If you feel able to write an affirmation, that's good. If you don't feel like you're in a place to write one, that's totally fine. Um, we can have a question. So, what would you like to know or better understand? Okay, so we're going to do one more round. So, we're going to go, I guess, with 5. Pen's running low on marker, or marker's running low on ink. Uh, so do number 5. And what's coming up for you? How's that toxic voice starting to sound? Maybe it's shifting, maybe it's the same. Who knows? Just noticing and writing it down. So we're going to respond now. Number 6 for you. Respond to what they just said. And once again, I want you to do an acknowledgement. But if you can do an affirmation now, that'd be great. If you don't feel like that feels real for you, that's fine. You don't need to. But something along the lines of like, that's real. That's hard. I can see why that's difficult. Um, so it's just, someone to acknowledgement, just a bit more compassion. There's just like a bit more understanding. There's a bit more care in it. Or if you feel really ready, you can say something like, I care about you. I care about this. This matters to me. And once again, only say those things if you feel ready for them. So, if you're done with that, I would like for you to offer a question to them, asking, offering a different response to the situation. That maybe instead of thinking that you should or shouldn't do something, that you have to, you can't do something, maybe that you, wait, what's something that you would like to do? What's a response that you feel is more appropriate for you? Be like, hey, I'd like to do this instead. What do you think? Would that work for you? How do you feel about it? And if you can't think of something, that's fine too. Just be like, hey, I want to do something different. What about that? How do you feel about that? I want to try out something different next time. Okay. So now this actually will be the last one. So we'll have a response from Miss Guided Helper to your counter proposal. And once again, whatever comes up for you via that toxic voice. Which may be, I like it. Okay, I don't like it. This scares me. The whole range, whatever maybe that's coming up for you is fine. And then we're going to do your final response, which something along the lines of, I hear that. I hear that. And I see that's true for you. I want to do X for myself. So I want to do that. And that's true for me. So, kind of however the misguided helper responded to your counter proposal, you're just saying, like, I hear that that's true for you, whatever the response was. And like, and this is what's true for me. And that's what's true for me, right? And just kind of really sitting with like, that's what's true for me. Okay. So I just want to take a little bit of time for folks to just kind of breathe that in, breathe that conversation in. Just breathing in, notice what's coming up for you. Breathing out, just notice how that conversation was for you. So just kind of noticing. And if you can share in the chat box what it was like for you to have this conversation with your misguided helper. Was there anything surprising that came out of it? Someone shared that it's not as scary as I thought to talk to my misguided helper. Yep. Oftentimes, our fear around the toxic voices is a lot more scary than directly engaging with them. Not always, I will say. That's why I asked for folks to not go to the toxic voice that's related to something that's really raw and traumatic for us. This is we're just practicing and starting out on smaller, more manageable things. But for the most part, most of our misguided helpers are long-standing pains. They're not like so raw that they might be overwhelming, at least on the first couple layers, right? So we have kind of time to get to the deeper pains. But for most things, it's actually much more manageable and far less painful just to actually be in contact with them than for us to try to run away from them. The running away actually can make it explode more for us. Somebody else shared that it was really interesting. I was surprised how easy it was to hear my misguided helper. I'm not sure I got a solution, but I understand better what's going on with me. Yeah. And you know what? The fact that you even understood that you understand better what's going on with you is in just what, maybe 10 minutes, honestly, is really phenomenal if you think about it. It's there, right? It's right there. The information, the wisdom that we're seeking is actually right there if we held the space for it. And when it's hard to hold space for ourselves, just have somebody else like me or a friend or this piece of paper, really. This piece of paper can hold the space for you. Um, just go back and forth, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And keep listening, keep listening, keep listening, and the solution will naturally start to arise. I obviously, as the facilitator of a group, couldn't customize it to where you were at, and you can have kept going on and on for like 20 back and forths, and then you would have noticed naturally a some sort of different approach arising out of that, out of the insights that are starting to come out of the toxic voices, right? Around what it was actually about. So being gently patient with yourself as you do this listening work is really, really key. Somebody else shared that my misguided helper is really driven by fear and strongly influenced by some things that happened in my childhood. Yeah. So that's like I said, a lot of the ways that we show up now, that our knee-jerk reaction, our coping strategies, our misguided helpers, really go back to things that happened when we were children, because we didn't have that much capacity to deal with bad things, and bad things happened a lot, just because that's life. Painful things happen, and our society doesn't support us in understanding those pains. So I take this approach, of calling them misguided helper, because I think it helps to humanize them, actually, and be like, they're actually coming from a place of desire to protect us, because there's a part of us that's afraid of being hurt that way again. And so this my misguided helper just needs to understand that we actually can do something different that will actually help better. Um, and they can stand down, they can actually relax, they can rest now. That's a lot of the work that I've done with my misguided helpers, was to let them rest, actually, that they didn't always have to be on guard. It was a great relief to them and to me, actually. And somebody else shared that, I would never have thought my misguided helper is actually hurt and in a lot of pain and is acting cautiously because of their experiences. I had a second insight of some parental figures that may have transmitted this message also because they were hurt and not acknowledged. I didn't even read that comment when I read the other comment. So yeah, um, exactly that. Oftentimes we just see people acting out, or we see ourselves acting out, and we're like, why is this happening? We want to blame them. It's like, oh, they're acting out because they think that's going to keep them safe. What are they afraid of? What's hurting them? Right? So to peel back those layers, and that's why I was going back and forth, right? These are literally layers that we're trying to pull back, just by, and we can do it just by giving acknowledgments, right? Acknowledgments are just so powerful. And then when we feel ready, moving to affirmations and having some questions to help deepen the conversation. So somebody else said, it was really good, but too short time to write the segments. Very true. Um, you can write as long as you want, when you do it by yourself, obviously. So I highly encourage you to do this practice with yourself. Um, just as long as you keep going back and forth between you and misguided helper. So, or maybe you can just do one for a long time and switch. I mean, really just experiment, see how that works for you. And they were sharing that, and the questions are really helpful, because I just simply asked the first time, what is good about the strategy of staying silent, and afterwards, what would be good about speaking up. So it was kind of simply making a pro and con list, and it helped me to understand and complex it out. And it's impressing how much of the solution just comes up by myself. Listening to me feels good. Yeah, so we often feel like we need to strive to figure something out. We often feel like we need to make ourselves figure out. We have to like pour more in to knowing what to do. And in my own experiences and working with other people, just as well as what I learned from different healing and spiritual practices, is that the wisdom is already there. We just actually need to open up to listen to it. We need to get out of our own way. And so simply noticing and then acknowledging will help it be released. And the more we just keep on doing that, we will start to see clearly what is going on. Because all the stuff that's getting in the way will start to fly away, and we'll be left with what actually is there. And then we'll have something tangible to work with. We'll have something to actually respond to. Somebody else shared that I was surprised that I could say what my misguided helper says, and that its last response was rude, calling me a fool, and that I can say in response that I can feel I tried my level best, because I do care. Yeah. And so it can feel funny to folks who, when they do this for the first time, because you're going back and forth between the misguided helper and yourself. So it can feel funny, but this is a voice that's actually been really, it's been there a long time for most of us, maybe most of our lives. So, and then there's us. And this, and hopefully we've been hearing our own voice to a certain degree. Maybe it's quiet sometimes, maybe it's loud sometimes, but these are voices that we've actually been having. We may not have noticed it. Um, but that also depends on how much we've suppressed them and how unconscious we are, or how conscious we are of them. So this practice is a mindfulness practice of noticing and acknowledging as such, which doesn't mean that everything will magically get better. As this person shared, like the response from the misguided helper was rude, called them a fool. And this person could also choose their response to that critique, that criticism, that insult. They could be like, yes, I feel I do care. This is what I want to do. You can you can think that, and you do think that. That's your experience. This is how I think. This is my experience. And so really distinguishing the two and really grounding yourself in your own needs, your own feelings, your own desires, right? This is actually what the practice is about. So we have just a few minutes left. And I want to just mention, I would like to ask the question of, if there's one thing that you want to make sure to remember from this tea time with Sandra, what would that one thing be? What's been most helpful for you? Or what do you want to make sure you do afterwards to carry this work into the rest of your week? And writing that in the chat box. So just writing what's something you want to make sure you carry into the rest of the days with you. Somebody shared that separating what I want and what the misguided helper wants, or any other person. Yeah, don't. It gets very confusing if we take in those other voices and make it believe that it's our own. It's like, it's not. If we can actually just treat it kind of like the TV, like we can see that it's happening, but it's not actually us. It can really help us to separate and reground in ourselves. Somebody else shared, I want to remember to keep on having compassion toward this misguided helper. And maybe that will help me remember to have more patience, empathy, and compassion toward close family members that I find triggering. Yeah. And I just want to, I think having compassion toward ourselves, our misguided helpers, and other people is super, super important. And it's a feeling that we can't make happen. And so understanding that the way compassion is naturally arising feeling. And so we can't make ourselves feel compassion. And we can acknowledge what's happening. So compassion happens as a response to being in the presence of pain, actually. And so if we can acknowledge, one, if we can notice what's happening in the first place, we acknowledge, reflect back, that's what's happening, and just keep peeling back the layers, then we'll have something to actually be understanding about. So knowing that the compassion, understanding arises after we've actually looked at what's coming up and acknowledged it. Because sometimes we try to jump to compassion before we even know what's going on, and that's very difficult. You can't make yourself feel compassionate when you don't actually know what the thing is, that there's even pain there. We have to be in the presence of pain first. Somebody else shared that I want to keep trying to engage in this internal dialogue as a practice to do it better, because I can see it really helps. It can really help me to be grounded in my true voice. Yep. So this is actually a written version of the physical mindfulness exercise that I do with folks in my other tea time with Sandras, and what I teach in my healing from oppression. um, and everyday self-love course. So this, sometimes it can be hard to hold your body in this conversation, and that's what I often guide people through. And because we have such a writing focused society, I find that some people find that writing is more useful for them. So it's really, go with what feels good for you, what feels like can hold you. This is why I try to provide a variety of different practices, because it's different for different folks and it's different for different experiences. And I want you to have a broad toolkit to choose from. But it's really the same practice of just noticing what's coming up for us, acknowledging it as such, and just keep doing that over and over again. And then naturally, feelings of affirmations, understanding, compassion, empathy will start to arise. But that happens naturally, as I was just saying. You want to just start out with acknowledgments. Just start out with acknowledgments. Somebody else said that they want to try this writing practice some more with different misguided helpers. I strongly recommend that. Actually, in my everyday self-love course that I taught, it's a written course actually, and I would have people track their toxic voices, just kind of keep just mark when they heard that toxic voice, and they started to notice their patterns to what voices were coming up and what they're about. And so you can do that if you like, and then you can just pick one. It can kind of get overwhelming sometimes if you open yourself up to all the misguided helpers at once. I don't really recommend that, but you can, get a sense of the landscape a bit, and then just choose one that feels manageable for you, right? But we're really trying to start small and grow gradually. Don't do a lot of things, just try to do very few. That will make it much more manageable for you, because this is pain that we're getting in touch with, and I think it's important to do that with thoughtfulness. And if you're somebody who knows that there's much more there, that maybe some professional help would be best to do this work with, I highly encourage you. If that's a resource that's accessible for you, because I know that's not true for everybody as well. But thinking through, like, what are your needs, and what are some ways to ask for help around those needs. And like I said, this is why this Tea Time with Sandra is here, why it's free, and because some of this is so simple, like it's just a list like this and some listening, and most people don't know that this is possible, this is available for them. So, share with your friends if you would like, both around Tea Time with Sandra as well as this practice. And that's even best if you have a buddy that you can do this with. But like I said, start small, grow gradually. All right, friends, it is now the end of tea time. And so I'm so grateful for everybody for showing up. I recognize a lot of the same names, and that always really excites me, because this practice is a practice. We need to keep practicing and keep doing it for it to really sink in. So I'm excited to see everyone's names again. Too bad I can't see people's faces, but I do see you, and I appreciate you showing up for yourself and for this. All right, bye, my friends.